The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was a place of cold silence and glowing blue lights where the most powerful species in the galaxy made decisions that shaped the lives of trillions. And today, standing alone in the center of that giant hall, surrounded by alien leaders from distant worlds, was a single human, Envoy Elias Cade, sent from Earth not as a warrior or threat, but as a symbol of peace and unity, hoping that this meeting would lead to a future where humanity could finally have its voice heard among the stars. Elias stood tall, his face calm but his eyes burning with something ancient and unshakable, something the Council had failed to understand about humans, resolve. And when he spoke, his voice was not loud, but clear, and every word carried a weight heavier than metal, speaking of cooperation, peace, and mutual respect, asking only that Earth be allowed to exist without threat, to be recognized not as a danger, but as a part of the galactic community. But the Council had already made up its mind. Without warning, without debate, the Council leader, a tall, gray-skinned being from the Xarn Dominion, raised one hand, signaling the guards, and before Elias could finish his next sentence, before he could even realize what was happening, the room was filled with a strange humming sound as a weapon activated, and in a flash of violet light, the envoy fell to the ground, his body lifeless, his message of peace never completed. For a long moment, no one spoke. There was no trial, no explanation, only silence, and the soft sound of Elias Cade's communicator hitting the floor, a communicator that had been broadcasting live to the entire galaxy, including Earth. Across hundreds of systems, people watched in disbelief as the human envoy was executed not for war, not for violence, but for daring to ask for peace, and while many alien citizens gasped or whispered, wondering why such a brutal act had been allowed, others stared at their screens in silence, realizing something far more terrifying. The Council had declared its position not just on humanity, but on any who dared to challenge their rule. Back on Earth, in a command center buried deep under the Arctic ice, General Soraya Vale stood frozen as the broadcast ended, her hands clenched at her sides, her jaw tight, and without turning around she said just 3 words: "Begin the protocol." A technician at her side hesitated, his face pale, his voice shaky as he replied, Are we sure, ma'am? This means war." General Vale slowly turned her head, her eyes like stone, and answered, "They spilled human blood without cause. We will show them what we were built for." Deep beneath the Earth's oceans, something ancient stirred. Massive metallic shapes the size of cities shifted in the darkness. Systems began powering on after decades of sleep, and AI voices echoed inside long-forgotten control rooms as engines roared to life. Leviathan-class warships, hidden from the galaxy for generations, began to awaken from their slumber. While the rest of the galaxy believed Earth was weak, the truth was far more dangerous. Earth had known that peace would not last forever. They had hoped, yes, but they had prepared as well. The death of Elias Cade was not the end. It was only the beginning. And far above the Earth, on a silent orbital relay station, where thousands of satellites monitored every star system, a signal was sent, coded, ancient, and known only to a few, triggering alerts in secret colonies across Mars, Titan, and even hidden listening posts near the edge of known space. Humanity was no longer waiting to be accepted. Humanity was moving. And as news of the execution spread, many alien leaders who had supported the Council's decision began to feel a quiet dread in their hearts because they had seen something in Elias's eyes before he died. Something they could not explain, something cold and human and terrifying. And now, that feeling was growing stronger, like a storm building behind black clouds. No one spoke of it out loud, but they all began to ask the same question in the back of their minds. What if we just made the worst mistake in the history of the galaxy? Because when humans mourn, they cry. But when they're betrayed, they build something far worse than war. They build purpose. And now, The galaxy was about to learn what purpose looked like when born from fury. In the cold silence of space, where stars glittered like distant eyes and planets spun quietly in their orbits, something had changed. Something invisible but powerful, because ever since the execution of the human Envoy, there was a strange heaviness in the air, like the calm that comes just before a storm breaks across the sky, and across hundreds of systems. Ships slowed down, transmissions quieted, and even the most powerful empires paused, sensing something was coming but not knowing what. The Galactic Council believed it had silenced Earth with one strike, that humans would retreat in fear or plead for forgiveness. But instead, the opposite happened. Earth went silent, completely silent, not because they had nothing to say, but because they were preparing something, and that silence felt louder than any words they could have spoken. On Mars, in vast underground cities, shielded by red stone and hidden behind false signal beacons, engineers, scientists, and soldiers worked without sleep, their hands moving fast across consoles, bringing old systems back online, while above them, large hangars opened up into the planet's thin atmosphere and launched ships that had never been seen by alien eyes. Sleek, black vessels with no identification, moving faster than light and disappearing into the void like ghosts. On the icy moon of Europa, beneath frozen oceans, hidden deep below the crust, there were humans who had been living there in secret for decades, training, waiting, and now, as the signal from Earth reached them, they rose from the depths like shadows in the water, armed with weapons that bent light and armor that could blend into the dark of space itself, each one part of a force Earth had never spoken of but always prepared. The Council had no idea what they had unleashed. In the capital of the Virelian Empire, one of the core members of the Galactic Council, a group of ambassadors sat around a circular table, reviewing reports from their outer colonies, and each one showed the same strange pattern. Missing ships, blackouts in sensor arrays, strange signals repeating across encrypted channels, and colonies going completely dark without warning, as if something unseen was sweeping through the stars, erasing everything in its path. One of the older ambassadors, a creature with glass-like skin and glowing veins, leaned forward and whispered, This is not war. This is a warning." But by the time the Council began to understand, it was already too late. In a star system near the galactic rim, a massive armada belonging to the Xarn Dominion, who had ordered the human Envoy's death, was moving toward Earth, nearly 1,000 ships strong, with enough firepower to glass a planet and break through moons, a force meant not just to punish Earth, but to make an example out of them so no other species would dare question the Council again. And yet, when they arrived, they found nothing. No human ships, no defenses, no broadcasts, only the quiet blue glow of Earth spinning slowly beneath them, its surface calm, its skies clear. And for a moment, the Xarn commanders believed it had all been a bluff, that Earth had no answer for the attack. Until the stars disappeared. One by one, the stars in the background vanished, not because they had gone out, but because something massive had moved in front of them. Shapes larger than cities, darker than space, moving without sound or warning, and by the time the first Xarn warship realized what it was looking at, it was already too late. The Leviathan fleet had arrived. Built in secret, hidden for generations, designed not just to survive a war, but to end one before it began. The Leviathan fleet was Earth's final answer to any threat that came from the stars, and it moved through the enemy ranks like a silent storm, cutting through ships with weapons no one had ever seen, technology so advanced it seemed like magic, and within minutes, the mighty Xarn armada began to fall apart. Their screams never reached the ground. On Earth, General Soraya Vale stood inside Command Tower 1, watching the silent battle unfold on holographic screens, her face calm, her voice cold as she spoke to her commanders, saying, "No more envoys, no more warnings. Let them understand that Earth does not forget, and Earth does not kneel." Across the galaxy, people began to whisper a new name, the Leviathans of Earth, a name that spread through traders, smugglers, and broken soldiers who survived the shadows. And though no one knew where they came from or how many there were, everyone understood one thing. The humans had not come to beg. They had come to remind the galaxy that they were not children of the stars. They were children of storms. And now, the storm had begun. As the days passed and more outer worlds began to fall silent, the Galactic Council found itself trapped not by physical weapons, but by fear and confusion. Because the humans were not fighting like any known species, they struck without warning, disappeared like smoke, and left behind nothing but wreckage, silence, and questions that no one could answer. Inside the Grand Council Tower on Varelion, the atmosphere had changed completely, and where once diplomats and leaders from 1,000 worlds had walked proudly under the light of the twin suns, now they moved quietly, looking over their shoulders, wondering which of their own might have already been turned by the humans or was next on the long and growing list of targets. Ambassador Vorontar, who had once led the motion to execute the human envoy, now paced alone in his chambers, reading the latest classified reports with trembling hands. Space stations cut off, high-ranking officers found dead in locked rooms, entire colonies surrendering without a single shot being fired. And the strangest part was that no one had seen the humans coming, and no one could trace how they got in. It was as if Earth had become a ghost, and its people had become shadows. Meanwhile, in a forgotten mining facility, buried deep beneath one of Saturn's moons, a team of human engineers worked around the clock on something that was never supposed to exist again. A weapon called the Event Horizon, banned by Earth's own laws long ago, because it didn't just destroy targets, it erased them, leaving behind nothing but static, and now it was being prepared for the final phase of Earth's response, not to dominate the galaxy, but to make sure no one ever threatened humanity again. Back on Earth, in the unified command hall under the Rockies, Commander Rylan March stood beside a massive holographic star map that glowed with red and green dots. Enemy worlds, allied sympathizers, silent systems, and though his face showed no fear, his voice was sharp and calm as he addressed the Council of Earth's last remaining decision-makers, saying, "This isn't just about justice anymore. This is about survival, and the only way to survive is to make sure they know what happens when you kill one of us without reason." Across the galaxy, strange things continued to happen. Supply convoys exploded without being touched. Council I networks began receiving encrypted messages written in ancient Earth languages, and even the great defense network of core world Zarthex went offline for 11 minutes, just long enough for 3 human operatives to land, steal data, and leave without leaving a trace. The Council was beginning to collapse, not from the outside, but from within, and everyone knew it, yet no one dared speak the truth aloud. That Earth was winning, not with power, but with fear, not with numbers, but with precision. And all of it had started because they had believed humans were too emotional, too chaotic, too weak to stand up to the old powers of the stars. They had been wrong. In one dark council chamber, a nervous ambassador whispered to her assistant, "They are not just fighting us. They are changing the rules." Back on Varelion, the once proud leader of the Galactic Council, Chancellor Halvarin Trex, finally called for an emergency meeting, not in the usual halls, but in the war room deep beneath the surface, because even he no longer trusted the open chambers above, and as the members arrived one by one, escorted by private guards and silent drones, it became clear that the war was no longer about strategy or peace. It was about control, and Earth was taking it. During the meeting, a hologram flickered to life in the center of the war table, not one created by council systems, but by something hacked into their mainframe. And from it, a calm voice spoke in basic galactic tongue, saying, "This war ends when you end it. Surrender the architects of the Envoy's execution. Dismantle your fleets. Accept Earth as equal, or watch your skies turn dark." The message played once. Then the power died for 30 seconds across the entire capital planet. And when the lights returned, every council member had received the same encrypted message on their private device. You started this. We finish it. Now the entire galaxy was watching, not to see who would win, but to see how far Earth was willing to go. And as more systems went dark, and the stars grew quieter each night, even the boldest warriors in the council fleets began to ask themselves the same quiet question. Had they just made humanity their last mistake? As the burning remains of the Xarn Armada floated silently in the darkness above Earth, casting broken shadows across the planet's surface, the entire galaxy stood still, not in peace, but in terror, because for the first time in 1,000 years, someone had not only defied the Galactic Council, but had destroyed one of its greatest fleets without saying a single word. And that silence spoke louder than any declaration of war. The council chambers, usually filled with confident voices and political games, were now weighed down by confusion and panic, and the once arrogant ambassadors who had voted for the human envoy's execution now avoided each other's eyes, knowing deep in their cold hearts that they had made a mistake that could not be taken back. For the humans had answered not with speeches, but with shadows and fire. Back on Earth, the mood was not one of celebration, but of grim preparation, because the leaders of the unified human command knew this was only the beginning, and that the Council would never allow such a humiliation to stand without striking back, even if it meant risking everything, because pride was often more dangerous than any weapon. Commander Rylan March, a former soldier turned strategic director, stood inside the heavily shielded bunker known as Deep Station Atlas, his fingers moving quickly over a glowing table as fleets moved on the holographic map above it, and while others spoke of defense, Rylan was already planning the next move, because he knew Earth's safety would never last unless they reached into the stars and struck the heart of their enemy before it regrouped. Far beyond Earth, in the shadowed asteroid belts of the Halvaran expanse, small black ships slipped through space without lights, riding magnetic waves and silent engines, each one carrying elite human operatives who were trained for infiltration, sabotage, and disruption, and their mission was clear: spread chaos across the outer systems, cut off supply routes, and send a clear message. Earth had no borders. Meanwhile, on Council World Verelion, where buildings floated in the air and gravity bent under ancient machines, a young scholar named Tyver Nell had stumbled across a hidden file deep in the Council's archives, a record sealed 5 centuries ago, and as he read through the dusty data, his hands began to tremble, because what he found were early reports of Earth's experiments with deep space physics, zero-mass weapons, and something called Project Leviathan, which had been dismissed at the time as fantasy. But now, with entire fleets gone and witnesses describing black ships that moved like shadows and tore through matter itself, Tyver realized the truth. Earth had not been quiet because it was weak. Earth had been quiet because it was waiting. And the Council, blinded by power, had awakened something far older and more prepared than they ever imagined. Back in orbit around Jupiter, the human dreadnought Vanguard Prime hovered like a sleeping beast, its hull coated with reflective plating that made it vanish into the void, and inside its bridge, Captain Nayla Sarin watched the last of the Leviathan fleet regroup after the battle, her face cold and sharp like carved steel, as she gave the command to move toward the galactic core, not to conquer, but to expose the rot at the Council's heart. As they moved, humans across Mars, Europa, and Titan stood by their screens and watched history unfold in real time, and even those who once feared war now whispered the same words. They started this. We'll finish it. On a remote Council-aligned world called Renor Prime, the first strike came not from a ship, but from silence. As the skies went dark, communication systems failed, and then the power grid collapsed in seconds, followed by the soft thud of explosions from deep within the planet's government sectors, all triggered by a single operative who walked away without being seen. This wasn't war the way the galaxy knew it. This was retribution. This was the wrath of a forgotten species, Humans who had been pushed, insulted, underestimated. And now, the stars themselves were witnessing their fury. In the council's emergency meeting, an ancient senator with 6 glowing eyes and a body made of shifting glass slammed his hand on the table and shouted, "They are not fighting like us. They are hunting us. They are inside our systems. They are breaking our codes. They are turning our allies, and we still don't know how many of them there are." But even as his voice echoed across the hall, no one answered, because deep inside, they'd all feared the same thing. That Earth had never truly been part of their council. It had been watching, learning, waiting. And now, the galaxy would finally learn what humans were truly capable of when they had nothing left to lose and everything to protect. The darkness that had spread across the galaxy wasn't just from the stars vanishing. It was from a creeping, growing sense of fear as the once unshakable Galactic Council realized they had underestimated humanity. Their fleets were scattered, their communications broken, and their once immense power was slipping away, piece by piece. And it all started with one fatal mistake: the execution of a single human envoy. Commander Rylan March stood before Earth's council once again, his expression grim as he addressed the last surviving leaders. The room was silent, save for the soft hum of technology and the muffled echoes of distant voices from the halls beyond. It felt like the last breath before a storm. "They think we're afraid. They think they can take us down with a message, with fear," Ryland said, his voice low but steady. "But they're wrong. We were always built for war, but not just any war. The kind where we rise from the ashes and destroy those who believe they can control us." The room was filled with the tired eyes of men and women who had lived their lives in the comfort of dominance and power. Now that comfort had been shattered, and the harsh reality of what they had unleashed was setting in. The entire galaxy was changing, and Earth was the catalyst. In the high-security chambers of Varelian's capital, Chancellor Halvarin Trex paced back and forth, his mind racing. The humans were not just fighting back. They were attacking in ways no one had anticipated. Every tactic, every move, had been turned against them, and the losses were stacking up faster than the Council's strategists could account for. It was no longer just about the death of one human envoy. It was about the destruction of their authority, their way of life. Halvarin stopped pacing, turning to the holographic star map on the wall. The familiar red and green dots were now replaced by blinking signals that showed Earth's Leviathan, the ultimate weapon, moving toward the heart of the Council's military base. Their last line of defense, their last hope, was about to be obliterated, and they had no idea how to stop it. "We cannot give them what they want." One of the advisors spoke, his voice trembling. "The terms they have set, they are impossible. We cannot allow them to dictate our future." "We may not have a choice," Halvarin replied coldly, his gaze fixed on the stars. "Their weapon is unlike anything we have seen before. If they come to Varelian, we will not survive." Across the galaxy, the war was escalating at a terrifying pace. Earth's fleets, once thought to be outmatched, had taken out 2 major council fleets with surgical precision. No one had ever imagined humans could fight like this. They didn't just use their technology. They used their cunning, their unpredictable nature, and their ability to adapt quickly in ways that no other species could. Earth was changing the rules of war, and every victory sent a shockwave through the galaxy. And yet, amidst this rising tide of destruction, there was an unsettling silence in the ranks of the Galactic Council. The fear that the humans were capable of anything was starting to take root in the very beings who had once considered themselves the rulers of the galaxy. They had made one terrible mistake, underestimating humanity. And now, they were paying the price. On Earth, the war machine continued to advance. Rylan March and his team stood ready to take the next step, the final step. "We won't stop," he declared, his voice unwavering. "We'll make sure they never forget what happens when they cross us." As Earth's forces prepared to make the final push to Varelian, every species across the galaxy watched in horror. knowing that this battle would not only decide the fate of the Council, but the future of the entire universe. The outcome was uncertain, but one thing was clear: Earth was no longer a pawn in the game of the stars. They had become the players. Virelion was not prepared for the chaos that was about to descend upon them, and as the massive fleet of Earth's Leviathan moved closer to their doorstep, they realized that their only option was to surrender or face complete annihilation. The power had shifted, and Earth's terrifying strength was now undeniable. The message from Earth had been clear from the start: you killed one of us. Now, we come for everything. The question was no longer whether the Galactic Council would fall. It was how much destruction they would leave behind when they did. Would they bow to humanity's power, or would they make one final stand and risk everything? As the first wave of Earth's attack ships breached the outer defenses of Virelion, the answer became painfully clear. The war that had begun with the death of one human envoy would end with the fall of an empire. The Council had only one choice left: surrender or die.